From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Clinicians who treat patients with eating disorders have endured a perfect storm of challenges in recent years. Specialists say the pandemic and the years that followed saw more people developing conditions like anorexia and bulimia, and often taking longer to seek help. On top of that, treatment for these conditions is expensive. At the same time, lawmakers have heard terrible stories of patients being mistreated at clinics in Colorado. Jennifer Brown has been covering this issue for the Colorado Sun. She remembers hearing from parents who tried to help their kids by finding a clinic where they could get help.
It was just heartbreaking to hear from these moms saying that they thought they were doing the best they could for their kid, and come to find out their kid was, in some ways feeling abused.
So how does Colorado, a national hub for this kind of treatment, address these issues? I spoke with Jennifer about the severity of these problems, but also about new measures that might offer patients better care in Colorado. You wrote that the need for eating disorder treatment has increased since the pandemic, and that patients are entering treatment when they are far sicker. What kinds of trends are specialists who work with eating disorders seeing in their patients in recent years?
Well, you're right. That's what they told me, that the people who have anorexia or bulimia are far sicker now by the time they seek help than before the pandemic. And what they were saying is that the isolation of the pandemic, leads to delays in care for all kinds of things. But also it was like people who are on the verge maybe of having an eating disorder or were in recovery from one. A lot of people slipped into eating disorders as a coping mechanism.
And I'm curious what else about life during the pandemic seems to have caused these increase in disorders. Certainly, we did have our coping mechanisms, but what else was going on?
Well, one other thing that was pointed out to me, Erin, a lot of social media and wellness companies were using that period as a time to say do something better for yourself, make yourself into a better person when you're stuck at home. And some people became gourmet chefs in their kitchen, and some people got on real serious weight loss and exercise kicks. I'm going to be a new person by the time this isolation is over. And it was quite dangerous for some people, especially those that may have had the genes or, other tendency to fall into eating disorder behaviors.
Now, patients who seek help often go to clinics that have not been regulated by the state in the past. You have heard some horror stories, to use your words, about what goes on in some of these facilities. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, a lot of the horror stories I heard were unfolding in testimony at the state capitol last year. I remember a young woman who came, she's only 16 years old, and she's testifying before this committee. And she's saying that she was pinned down by big, strong guys when she was 15 years old, and she had marks on her wrist because they're trying to hold her down for blood draws while she was in a residential eating disorder center in Colorado. She talked about having to stand naked in front of all the other girls that were there, and they'd all be weighed one at a time. And she just found it very embarrassing and shameful, and stories like that.
Jennifer, let's talk about solutions. A new law meant to oversee treatment facilities will be in place for 2026. This will regulate facilities that offer hospital-level care, but not places like independent therapist offices. What kinds of practices are the laws doing away with?
Yes. Well, first of all, one of the problems is, Colorado's been this hub really for eating disorder care. People come from around the nation to go to these programs that we have. And Colorado was not regulating these in terms of a behavioral health way. So this new law, it was passed in 2024, and it says that by next January 2026, that all eating disorder treatment facilities in the state, whether they have day programs or outpatient or overnight, will have to be regulated by the Behavioral Health Administration. The law, interestingly, also lays out some very specific rules that will not be allowed. For example, a patient is allowed to request to have a private weigh-in, to not be naked in front of other people.
Wow.
They also put something in there which is quite interesting about dietary restrictions, because a lot of the complaints were from people who were saying that they were vegan and, the Eating Disorder Center required that they eat meat or dairy or eggs or any of these things. It's an interesting section of this legislation.
Jen, you reported on a new treatment facility in Denver that takes Medicaid. It's called ED Care. It opened a few weeks ago and already has a wait list. I'm wondering how unusual it is that they will take Medicaid patients.
Well, for residential, they're the very first in the state of Colorado to do it. Traditionally, these residential treatment centers, they're very nice. In some ways, the ones I've been look like a luxury hotel, very modern, but extremely expensive. We're talking thousands of dollars a week, either out of pocket, so they're for people who have the means to pay, or people with good insurance that would cover that. And people on Medicaid, which are Colorado's low-income folks, were not able to get that kind of care until this new residential treatment center opened.
Well, it sounds like things are improving in terms of treatment options and regulations. When you talk to experts who treat these disorders, how optimistic are they?
Well, right now, I think the optimism is certainly surrounding the idea that more and more of these places are going to be accepting Medicaid. The wait list at the ED Care is already filled with people, and 50 to 60% of the patients that go there qualify for Medicaid. So that, I think, will be huge. There was mixed feelings, of course, from the places that provide treatment when the state was talking about all these new regulations. But you could just get a sense that they've been allowed to operate without much interference. They had inspections from the Department of Health, but those are different. Those aren't how are you treating your patients in terms of what are best mental health care practices. Those are more like, is this place safe?
Safe, right.
Yeah. So this is a whole new world that should change a lot, I think, in Colorado when it's in effect.
Jennifer Brown is a reporter for the Colorado Sun. She's been covering treatment centers in Colorado for patients with eating disorders. We'll put a link to her recent story in the show notes and at kunc.org. By the way, you can check out any of our In The NoCo interviews at kunc.org or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And that's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.